In this video, I will be analysing William Blake's poem Infant Sorrow, which comes from his 1794 collection Songs of Innocence and of Experience. This poem has always featured in the Experience collection, and this video is aimed at giving you the key concepts of the poem if you are studying English literature A-level and Blake features in your course. This poem is only 2 stanzas long. It's one of his shorter ones, but there is a degree of ambiguity because we as readers are not given all the answers as to why the characters in the poem are feeling the way that they feel. So in this poem, having been born into what is called a dangerous world, the newborn baby is instantly trying to escape it, desperate to free itself. It is believed that the birth of the child was traumatic, and the parents, both mother and father, are not presented as particularly happy or looking forward to raising a child. But we don't really know why, and this is where the ambiguity comes from. There are lots of options which we'll discuss in a second. We also don't know why the child believes that the world that it's been born into is dangerous. And we don't know really why the baby is scared, because the baby does not speak in this poem, unlike the Infant Joy poem in Innocence, which is the sister poem to this one. So there's lots of unanswered questions. It might be worth researching to see if you can find the version of the poem as it was published in manuscript form, because I believe that this poem has been shortened with stanzas missed out. So the answers perhaps might be in the longer manuscript version. So the poem itself is only 8 lines long. It's a very short poem made up of 2 stanzas. So if we look at the first stanza, we have here the child as the speaker. We have the possessive determiner my, as well as the first person singular pronoun I, meaning that the child is the one who is talking. Just glossing over or skim reading the language, we can see a semantic field of suffering. We've got words like groaned, wept, helpless, naked, bound, sulk, and so on. And that really does put this poem within the Experience collection because of that tone. So we're told that the mother groaned, the father wept, and that suggests that neither parent is showing happiness or contentment, which is often the usual feeling of childbirth. The childbirth has probably been a terrible experience. The mother has probably been in pain for a while. We also don't know if the baby is actually wanted by the parents. The baby could have been an accident, and they're viewing the baby as a bit of a burden, maybe. The parents could also be worried about the world in which they are going to be growing, in which they're going to be raising the child in. They could also be poor and worried about feeding it. Can they afford food? So they could be in poverty as well. And we don't have any answers to these questions. It's up to you to decide what you regard to be perhaps the most relevant, or indeed engage in a discussion of perhaps all of these interpretations to develop your discussion of the poem. We have the adjectives helpless, naked, and the caesura there, either side of naked, perhaps heightens the sense of suffering and vulnerability. There is also the verb leapt. We're told that the child leaps into this dangerous world upon its birth, and you could argue that that's a very dystopian depiction of society. There is no sense here, unlike the Infant Joy poem, that the world of innocence is kept separate from experience. It's almost as if the world of experience almost attacked or imposed itself onto the child as soon as possible. This, of course, was also the time of the Industrial Revolution, and perhaps what is being mentioned here is the fact that it's a dangerous society because of the awareness that Blake had of the child exploitation that went along with the Industrial Revolution, with children sometimes as young as 5 or 6 being employed in factories because they had small hands and could unblock machines and so on. The stanza ends with a very ambiguous simile. The child says that It's like a fiend hid in a cloud, which is quite a menacing simile. Of course, angels sit on clouds, not fiends. So this could be the parent's view of the child, which the child has already picked up upon. Um, a fiend is perhaps connotations of something that's unpleasant, undesirable, a little devil, full of unwanted energy. And of course, that energy could be conveyed through that word leapt, which suggests some physical force. So maybe the parents are ill equipped or too weary to actually look after this energetic bundle of joy in this particular context. As we move into the second and, of course, last stanza, the rhyme scheme becomes clear. We have a regular AABB rhyme scheme, which you could argue reinforces the constancy of the child's misery, but also perhaps the parent's misery as well. We have the verbs struggling and striving, which suggest that the baby is unable to find contentment, as it did in the innocence counterpart, infant joy. It is trapped, it is unable to seek freedom. That is reinforced through the phrase swaddling bands, which suggests that this baby has been wrapped very tightly in a blanket, so it has lost the use of its limbs, and therefore it feels that oppression and entrapment, which is a metaphor for how it feels in society more generally, or will feel as it grows up. There is no dialogue between the parent and the child in this poem, unlike in Infant Joy. It is just the child talking. So there is no democratic dialogue, for example, where the parent listens to the child, and in Infant Joy, of course, is able to pick its own name. So this is not the same harmonious relationship between child and parent as we saw in Infant Joy. The poem finishes with the adjectives bound and weary, which again continues that semantic field of suffering. And there is no solution really offered at the end of this poem. Nothing really happens to bring about a change in thought. The child is just left to sulk upon my mother's breast. So there's a sense that this sense of suffering is going to continue. So you could argue that this is a pessimistic depiction of the child's place in the society that will grow up in, and the parents already know the realities of this, and therefore that takes away the sense of joy from the birth. So it doesn't matter really how long the child has the protection of its parents. At the end of the day, it cannot avoid the reality of society forever, which is synonymous in Blake's view with suffering, poverty, and a lack of freedom. So a short poem all about representing the child as a victim in perhaps a cruel world.